What was the most gross thing you experienced in a work setting? Story 1. Enjoy the roller coaster. Now, a while back, 2007 to 2008. I was working as a healthcare assistant via an agency for an old fellow who was in the final horrors of motor neuron disease. He was ventilated and fully locked in, no movement apart from he could squint his left eye somewhat. This is how he communicated through a grid board with the alphabet. This took time to get the gist of what he wanted to say. He could also grind his teeth. Now this fellow had a wife who was a tad psychosis prone. She used to run away with his credit card and be found a week later in Paris. This happened a few times. She was always decent with me and thought I probably would want an escape to if that was my lot in life. So my watch for the night shift began as normal. His wife had self-medicated with vodka and I put him to bed. Roll on 3 hours later, I hear the call from him to come into the dimly lit bedroom. This was the teeth grind over a baby monitor. I go in and head round to his side of the bed to begin the board communication. Next thing I know, the wife throws the covers off stark naked and was, well, fudding herself silly with a big old black dildo. I locked eyes with my client and he started to go through the board. I have never stared at someone's eyes so intensively as I did for those excruciating 4 minutes that it took him to say his piece. Unfortunately, it only took her 3 to bang one out in front of me. The unkempt muff of a crazed 58 years old will haunt me to my grave. Oh, and he wanted me to tell her to stop hitting his leg with her rubber cock. Did not get paid enough on that job. Story 2. I'm an online English teacher. I've seen some shit in my practice. Most notably, I had a drunk lady get undressed in front of the camera despite telling her not to do that. She posed for a while and then started crying as I was awkwardly looking away and wasn't really playing along. It's work, it's not a strip club. Then she passed out asleep and started snoring. Naked. On her bed. The company policy is to stay in the lesson room until the lesson is over in case she wakes up. She didn't. She rolled a couple of times and knocked the iPad down from her bed. We had another lesson not long after and she acted as if nothing had happened. Situation number 2. I'm not going to reveal people's nationality, but let's just say it's a rather conservative country. A guy booked my lesson and showed up on time. We started with some self-introductions before he excused himself as his girlfriend/wife was home. He muted his microphone but his camera restarted after 2 seconds and I could see them having a dispute of some sort. Didn't think much of it and I was checking homework on my second monitor. He wasn't coming back, so I decided to look back at them and they were having a physical fight in the middle of the room where he was obviously winning, but his wife was smacking him too here and there. At some point they noticed my poker face on the computer screen and just stopped seamlessly and proceeded to walk into what I believed to be the kitchen and close the door behind them. I could tell they were still fighting through the glass. The lesson came to the end and I logged out. I asked my manager whether I should let someone know and she said that I'd be fired if I did any such thing. Story 3. I have a couple of good ones. My first job was at the Gap. I was working the dressing rooms, and we would check on the customers, bring them different sizes, etc. This normal-seeming gal, maybe 20, came in and was trying on jeans. She kept having me bring her more and more, probably had 10 pairs in there. When she left, empty-handed, she said to me, "Have fun cleaning it up." I kinda laughed, but it turned out she had piled up the jeans and taken a shit on them. Thank God my manager was a trooper and she put on the hazmat suit kit from the back and dealt with it herself. Thanks, Dana. After high school I worked at an Italian restaurant. The prep cook was this dipshit punk dude, Timmy. One day after mixing the pizza dough, he and another male employee were joking about what it would be like to fuck the dough, and I guess you can deduce where that ended up going. They made a special pizza from it and offered it to one of the servers. They watched him eat it and were just howling. Making a big show of it. "What do you think of the new special pizza, Brad?" So repulsive, but I will say that the server was a complete prick. Threw a pot of hot coffee at the dishwasher once. If I remember correctly, more dough got made and no customers ate it. I wonder if Timmy lived past 40? Story 4. My office on board a ship had a set of stairs right outside the door that went up to another office that also belonged to my department, but currently had no occupants assigned as we were not fully embarked. I was working late one night and heard two sets of footsteps on the stairs outside the office, and then the door open and shut. A little while later, I hear the door again, and one set of footsteps come down the stairs and disappear off through the hangar. 10 minutes later, I hear another set of footsteps go up the stairs and the door open and close. A little while later, one set of footsteps coming down the stairs, and then my office door opens and a friend walks in beaming from ear to ear. Blurts out he's just fucked this girl upstairs, and I start chuckling and tell him about the other footsteps 10 minutes before him. He's mortified, I'm laughing. Then my office phone rings. I can see the extension number and it's the office upstairs, so I tell him to be quiet, and I answer on loudspeaker. She said she hoped I would be there. I often worked late, and told me she was upstairs naked, waiting for me. I told her to come down to my office instead. I hear the door, but no footsteps this time, and she bowls into my office, completely naked, not what I meant when I told her to come to my office, and closed the door behind her before spotting my friend she'd just banged stood to the side. Office was a bit of a dog-legged shape, and not square. Without breaking stride, she locked the door and declared that it looks like she's getting fucked by both of us then. I told her to go and get dressed and stop using my offices to fuck in, which she did very hurriedly. Story 5. Worked at UPS in my 20s, saw a chick absolutely railing herself with a dildo in her car, while driving, on the highway. Also had sex with my GF at the time in the back of a delivery truck, no packages were harmed. Broke up with my GF turned fiancé, moved to New Zealand, and started working construction for a small family business. The owner invited me over for Christmas as I didn't really know anyone else, met the whole family there, including the daughter and her current fiancé. They invite me up to the beach house for New Year's, Southern Hemisphere, Christmas. A good time was had by all. I make friends with everyone. Apparently the daughter took a liking to me. She breaks it off with the fiancé a month later, hooks up with me. We fall all over the parents' still under construction house and leave a bit of a mess. The mom complains about painters spilling paint on the carpet. Still feel like a POS for that one. Really nice people. I moved back home a few months later, and that was that. Worked at a hotel as concierge in my 20s also. Fucked the front desk manager in the supply closet, and several rooms. One time she was on her period and we ruined the mattress. The hotel had to throw it out. Another time, I was driving the complimentary hotel van to shuttle people downtown. A party group of similar-aged people came through and wanted to go drinking. They were adamant I go clubbing with them, and they had a few hot girls, so I went with them and had a few drinks, then drove them back, definitely under the influence. No sex on that one. Had sex with another coworker in my late 20s/early 30s at a game company we both worked for, in the toilets, after work, and then multiple times at her place. Eventually, I broke it off with her, which is when she filed a sexual harassment claim for a joke she said I told, and I got fired, despite no one else hearing it. So then I'm working at another game company, years later, in another country, and there's an adorable cute bubbly girl, got to be 15 years my junior, absolutely throwing hints my way, and I'm thinking there's no way she's into me. Turns out she had a silver fox fetish, which, being 40, is from work stress, and we ended up hooking up at a hotel, a few times. Now I work from home, safer for everyone. Except my wife. Story 6. I worked in a cylinder factory and I operated 3 machines that were placed in a square, and I was closed off from everybody. They were quite big, so I was placed in a different building than the people with smaller machines, so I was basically alone and I could do pretty much whatever I wanted because almost nobody came to check on me. I was doing my job well, and there was no reason for anybody to check on me except people who worked as programmers, who would often come to me a couple of times a day to set a different program depending on what I should be working on. So there was this guy in his 30s that was programming my machines, and I came to become friends with him quite quickly, and since we were alone there we could talk about everything while I waited for him to write or set a new program for me. He would stay with me for at least 1 to 2 hours because it took time. So this guy was quite crazy and didn't care much for the type of conversation. We would often talk about girls, sex, he was even showing me porn and what he was into. One day he showed me gay porn and I realized he is bisexual. I have no problem with that. Later on he was assigned a person to help him and for him to train him to be a programmer, and I would become friends with that person too. We both knew how crazy our programmer was and we didn't mind much of what he was saying nor doing. One day as we were goofing around while we waited for the program to go, me and the new guy were goofing around, fighting, laughing, etc. So we turn around and we see our programmer turn towards us with his dick out and just staring at us. I was like, holy shit, look. The new guy turns around and quickly turns back towards me and was like, what did I just witness? My eyes. I bursted out laughing, but this guy had a huge dong. I never would have guessed what was hiding in his pants. Yes, I understand it was highly unprofessional, but still I didn't mind it much. Story 7. Was dirty texting some girls while at work and my HR director stopped by my desk without me noticing. She saw me messaging and asked who I was talking to. I was shook and she noticed. I said nobody and she was very pushy and asked to see my phone. Well, she scrolled up in the conversation where the nice young lady I was talking to asked for a picture of my cock. She saw it and replied with, wow, nice cock. She gave me a very sultry look and walked away. A few hours later, she sent me pics of herself in see-through lingerie to my work email address. Long story short, we did end up hooking up a few dozen times, and as well as her friend who was a manager in another department who ended up hiring me. Had a handful of threesomes with the two and worked there for 12 years, keeping all those pics in my email as ammo in case anything went down. This was / is still a top 10 tech company in the world and Fortune 50 company, by the way. I moved all the way up the ladder to end up working for the CTO and managing hundreds of managers, system architects, sysadmins, engineers, and more. I never crossed the line with any subordinates, but did enjoy my time messing around with it the other way around. Story 8. I used to lifeguard at a public beach when I was 16 to 17. My buddy and I were assigned to this part of the beach that required driving to and was about 3 miles down the beach from the guard shack. It was a pretty overcast day and there was really nobody on the beach most of the day, so we decided to detour to the liquor store and got a bottle of Captain Morgan. We must have drank 6 rum and cokes each before my buddy made a run to get our second bottle. Right towards the end of our shift, a kayaker who was fishing ended up flipping over his kayak and we had to make a rescue, with one of us taking the surfboard to get the kayaker and the other swimming out to get the kayak. We were both piss drunk, I'm sure, but we were varsity swimmers and made it through fine. We ended up getting an award that summer from the Red Cross, I believe. But I'll never forget when we got back to the guard shack and our manager said, you guys smell like a bar, and my buddy shot back with, we smoked a cigar on the drive back. The early 2000s were wild times, and that was wildly dangerous behavior. Would never dream of doing shit like that today. Story 9. I was in the military and was a part of a heavy fire team. 18 to 21-year-old men who are trained to kill and ready to die in a moment's notice is a wild thing to be a part of. I've seen it all. We were doing law enforcement type roles one time and we got a blast from one of our guys that he was in distress, and we couldn't get a hold of him. We swapped out our gear and went on the hunt for him. Last known location was some little rundown shack way off the beaten path, but still on base. This was after a major threat too, so our tempo was completely different than what we would normally see. We surround the house and start barking orders for anyone in to come out or they are getting their shit smashed in. Through the door we hear our buddy scream out, why the f*** are all you here? Door opens up and there he and his glory and 2 local girls. They were of age. Found out after they were detained for being on base without authorization, come out the shack, incredibly embarrassed. He had accidentally hit the special orange button on his radio and had zero idea. A decade later he is still known simply as Shaq. Story 10. Worked at a Chick-fil-A when I was 15 years old, as they were the only ones who would hire that young. They had a 16-year-old energetic classmate of mine dress up in the giant cow costume and take photos with kids in the restaurant occasionally. She was great at her job. I went to dry storage one day to get more Polynesian sauce and accidentally walked in on this classmate of mine changing out of her cow suit and back into her regular work uniform. Never understood why she changed back there instead of the bathroom, but when I glimpsed her in her bra and undies, I quickly turned away and instinctively covered my eyes. She then said, "No, it's okay. You can look if you want," as she touched my shoulder and turned me around to gaze at her. As someone who had just hit puberty, this was weird as fuck, but also kind of cool, and I never told anyone else. It's a miracle I didn't develop some sort of cow fetish or something. First time I ever saw a girl in her undies.